Seattle in December, a drizzle falls over streets bathed in golden light. The city looks like an old film reel, damp and quiet, its reflections scattered across the glass panes of tall buildings. On the 45th floor of the Galbraith Tower, light spills from an open kitchen where Serena Bunner carefully sets the dinner table as if it were a small celebration for two and perhaps the most important night of her life. She wears a cream-colored dress, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes bright with excitement and nervousness. Inside her, a secret beats with its own small rhythm, fragile, sacred, and still unnamed. The doctor said it had only been 6 weeks, yet Serena could already feel it. A life, no two lives. She couldn't stop smiling at the thought. On the table sits a simple dinner: lemon-roasted salmon, avocado salad, and a bottle of white wine she hasn't opened yet. The aroma fills the apartment, warm against the damp chill outside. Serena glances at the clock. 7:48 p.m. Wallace said he'd be home by 8. Each minute seems longer than the last. Rain taps gently on the window. The lamplight flickers across the white walls. Serena stands by the glass, gazing down at the city, the trails of cars glowing like streams of light. Seattle, tonight, looks like any other night. Only her heart is moving differently. She imagines that when he walks in, his smile and eyes soften when she says, "I have something to tell you." He might look slightly surprised at first, but then he'll smile, pull her close, and whisper, "We'll be okay." Serena believes that. This love has made her believe in all things good for 6 months. The elevator dings softly, and she hears Wallace's footsteps approaching. He walks in still in his black suit, grey tie, white shirt buttoned neatly, his cool, refined, distant cologne. "You're home," Serena says with a gentle smile, taking his coat to hang it up. "Yeah," Wallace replies, his voice tired. He moves to the counter, pours himself a glass of wine. His eyes pause briefly on the table. "You cooked?" "Roasted salmon. Your favorite." She smiles. "I have something to tell you." Wallace sets his glass down and sits across from her. "Actually, I need to talk to you, too." The air in the room thickens. A strange silence fills the space between them. Serena presses her lips together, hesitant. "You go first." He exhales, loosens his tie, his gaze drifting toward the window. "Serena, you know how I am. I've never been good with attachments." She laughs softly, trying to keep the mood light. "You mean with work? Or—" "No," he cuts in. "I mean, with children." Serena freezes. The words strike her like a cold gust of wind. Wallace rests his elbows on the table, his voice calm, almost detached. "I've never wanted kids, Serena. Not now. Not ever. My life is complicated enough. I don't believe I could be a father." Serena hears nothing but the rain hitting the glass for a few seconds. Every word he says lands heavy as iron. "You." Her voice trembles. "You mean? You never want children?" He nods. "That's right. I think we're happy as we are. We don't need more." Serena presses her lips tight, fighting back tears. Her heart feels crushed in her chest. Every image in her mind, his smile, their mornings together, their quiet plans, suddenly feels foreign. She inhales deeply, her hand trembling on the table. What if, one day, it happens anyway? What if I were pregnant? Wallace gives a faint, almost dismissive smile. "Then I'd say that's the worst thing that could happen." In that moment, her world collapses. She stands, silent. The room freezes. Wallace doesn't sense the change. He pours more wine, his gaze drifting toward the rain-streaked window. Serena walks into the bedroom, grabs her light coat, a pair of shoes, and her car keys. When she turns, Wallace finally looks up. "Where are you going?" She looks at him for a long moment. "I need some air." Then she walks out. The door closes softly behind her. Only the sound of rain remains. Wallace assumes she's upset and doesn't call after her. He doesn't know this is the last time he'll see her for the next 5 years. A small silver car speeds across the Aurora Bridge. The rain grows heavier, the streetlights smearing into streaks of gold. Serena grips the wheel tightly, her vision blurred with tears. Behind her, Seattle glows cold and distant in the rearview mirror. She carries little a small suitcase, a canvas bag, and a heart full of fractures. Inside her, two tiny lives sleep quietly, unaware their mother is crying. Near midnight, she stops at a roadside rest area. The neon sign flickers, the wind bites cold. She enters a small restroom and stares into the mirror, pale face, swollen eyes. Gently, she lays a hand on her belly and whispers, "It's okay, my loves. I'll protect you." From there, her path leads north along Highway 5, through misty hills and small coastal towns. By dawn, as the first sunlight breaks, she arrives in Willowbrook, a quiet village between pine forests and the foggy sea. The people there are kind. Aurelia Chen, the older woman who owns the bakery, rents Serena a small white cottage at the end of Maple Street with a low fence and a garden of purple flowers. Serena feels she can breathe again for the first time since that night. In the following months, she worked at a local cafe owned by Phoenix Whitmore, a strong, witty woman of Latin American descent who quickly became her friend. Phoenix knows Serena is pregnant but never asks. She says, "You don't have to tell me. I need to know you need someone, and I'll be here." Time passes, and two baby boys are born in the spring rain, Julian and Louis. Both healthy, both with pale blue eyes just like his. Serena cries, not from sorrow, but because the love she lost has left her with a miracle. She works hard teaching art at the elementary school and raising her boys in the little white house. Every morning, their laughter fills the garden. Willowbrook becomes a quiet haven where no one asks, "Where is their father?" Sometimes, when the boys are asleep late at night, Serena sits on the porch, looking up at the velvet sky. Seattle is now just a distant memory, a city of words she can never forget. But in her eyes, no anger is left, only calm and faith in the two small hearts sleeping inside. One night, Julian asks, "Mama, who is Daddy?" Serena bends down, strokes his hair, and smiles softly. He's someone you'll recognize when you meet him. And she believes that one day, fate will bring them together again, not for revenge, but to close a wound. Outside, the wind stirs through the trees, carrying the scent of lavender into the house. Serena rests her hand on the window frame and whispers like a quiet prayer, "No matter what, I still believe in love." Moonlight spills across the tiny home, glinting on a photo of the three of them on the wall, the first picture of a new chapter in her life. And somewhere far away, in the sleepless city of Seattle, Wallace Galbraith sits in his penthouse, staring into his half-finished glass of wine, not understanding why his life suddenly feels so empty. The rain begins again as if the city itself were crying for the words he can never take back. Seattle. 5 years later, the rain still falls, as if it never stopped. The city never seems to dry. It lives in a constant veil of mist and drizzle, as though feeding on a quiet, nameless sorrow. In the tallest building downtown, Wallace Galbraith sits behind a walnut desk, his face lit by the cold glow of numbers and growth charts on his monitor. The blue light makes his grey eyes look even more frigid. A plaque hangs on the wall behind him. The youngest CEO in Galbraith Innovations history. Magazines call him a tech prodigy, Seattle's golden man. But no one knows that behind this door sits a man who no longer understands what he's living for. Wallace once thought he had everything: power, wealth, brilliance. But ever since the night Serena disappeared, everything has felt hollow. He searched for her. God, he searched everywhere. He hired private investigators, combed hospital records, and contacted old acquaintances. No one knew where Serena Bunner had gone. It was as if she had vanished off the face of the earth. At first, he was angry that she had left without a word. Later, he turned that anger inward toward himself for the foolish words he had spoken. "I never want to have children." That sentence echoes in his head like a sentence passed down from a judge. He hadn't realized she took the rest of him when she left. Every night, Wallace dreams. In the dream, Serena walks away through the rain. He runs after her, but she dissolves like smoke each time he's about to reach her. He wakes up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, and the room falls silent again. Time keeps moving. Galbraith Innovations grows stronger. He grows richer and lonelier. Parties, women, laughter, none of it fills the void. None of them is Serena. No one has her eyes, her smile. On weekends, he drives out of the city. No destination, just the road. Sometimes he stops at gas stations or small towns, watching strangers pass by. Each time he sees a woman with long brown hair, his chest tightens. Once, he stopped at a seaside cafe and saw a woman holding a child. He stared for a long moment until he realized it wasn't her. Then he gave a quiet, bitter laugh and left. Once, drunk, he told his closest friend, "Maybe she has another family now." His friend replied, "Maybe she just didn't want to be hurt again." Wallace said nothing. He understood that better than anyone. But somewhere else, about 3 hours north of Seattle, life flows gently, like a peaceful melody. Willowbrook, a small town nestled between pine forests and a misty bay, where lavender blooms in spring and maple leaves burn red in autumn. In a white cottage at the end of Maple Street, Serena wakes each morning to the smell of baking bread and children's laughter. Her twin boys, who are 5 years old now, Julian and Louis, have grown fast. Julian is quiet, always carrying a box of crayons to draw wherever he goes. Louis is his opposite, mischievous, full of questions. Why does it rain? Why do leaves fall? They chase each other around the kitchen every morning, fighting for the first warm muffin. Serena teaches art at the town's elementary school. The children adore her, calling her Miss Serena, who smells like paint and sunshine. The neighbors call her the woman with the Willowbrook smile. Everyone knows she's a single mother, but no one prees. In a small town, people believe the past should be left alone as long as the present is kind. When the school bell rings in the afternoons, Serena walks her sons home, passing by Phoenix's Nest Cafe, where her friend Phoenix Whitmore is wiping the counter. "Were the boys a handful today?" Phoenix teases. "Just a little more than yesterday," Serena laughs. "You know," Phoenix says, "if someone like their father were around, I'd be rich by now. 3 cups of milk a day, 3 ice creams every afternoon." Serena chuckles, shaking her head. "I think they already get spoiled enough." Phoenix narrows her eyes, her tone softening. "Maybe they don't need more." But wanting is different from needing. Serena falls silent. A shadow flickers across her memory for a moment, gray eyes, a gentle smile, and the words she can never forget. "I never want to have children." She takes a deep breath, pushing the image away. The past belongs where it is. She's learned to move forward for her sons, for her peace. After the boys fall asleep that night, Serena sits by the window, watching the rain. She holds a cup of ginger tea, warmth spreading through her fingers. She's no longer the girl from 5 years ago, naive and fragile. Now she's strong, calm, whole in her own quiet way. She doesn't know that fate will knock again in just a few weeks, and this time, the man who once broke her heart will find her again. One autumn morning, Wallace decides to leave the city. He can't stand the suffocating air of the office, the endless meetings, the empty smiles. He wants to drive. He heads north, without direction. Pines line the highway. The scent of resin and mist seeps into the car. The radio plays an old song, "Fix You" by Coldplay, and something tightens in his chest. After nearly 3 hours, he stops at a small town called Willowbrook. A wooden sign hangs over the main street. On both sides, there are cafes, flower shops, and a tiny bookstore. The air feels startlingly peaceful. Wallace steps out of the car and walks down the street. He doesn't know why, but breathing feels easier here. Maybe because no one knows him. No one calls him Mr. Galbraith. He's just another stranger passing through. He stops at the town park, a small playground with slides, swings, and a great oak tree. Children's laughter fills the air. He sits on a bench, watching them run and tumble. A brown-haired boy darts past, holding a paper airplane. Another boy chases after him, shouting, "Louis, wait for me." Wallace turns. The second boy, with pale grey eyes, a high-bridged nose, and a wide grin, makes his heart stop. It's like looking at himself 5 years ago. The 2 boys tumble into the grass, laughing uncontrollably. Their laughter is so pure it makes his throat tighten. Then he hears a voice soft as wind, warm as sunlight. "Julian, Louis, be careful." Wallace turns around. Serena is standing there. She's wearing a light blue dress, her brown hair loosely tied, her eyes still the same, gentle, deep, with a hint of sorrow. Time hasn't dimmed her beauty. It's only made her quieter, like a lake after a storm. She lifts one boy, brushes the dirt from his shirt, and kisses his forehead. The tenderness of that gesture shatters Wallace's heart. He can't look away. After 5 years of searching and almost forgetting, and now she's right in front of him. Serena and the 2 boys who look uncannily like him. He takes a step forward, then stops. His heart pounds. Part of him wants to call her name. Another part fears this is just a dream. Serena looks up. Their eyes meet. For an instant, the world stops breathing. Wind rustles through falling leaves. Children's laughter fades in the distance. Only the 2 of them remain, standing still in the golden light of autumn. Serena, Wallace whispers, his voice shaking. She stands motionless, her hand gripping the strap of her bag. Her face is unreadable, but in her eyes a storm. "You," her voice trembles. "What are you doing here?" Wallace doesn't know what to say. His eyes fall on the children. Are they yours?" She presses her lips together, pulling the boys close. "Yes," she says quietly. They look." Wallace's voice breaks, unable to finish. "Don't." Serena cuts in, her tone cold. "You don't need to say anything." The boys look up at the stranger. Louis tilts his head. "Mama, who's that?" Serena says nothing. Wallace kneels slightly. Meeting their eyes, his eyes reflected in them. He takes a shaky breath. "Please, can you tell me their names?" "Julian and Louis," she answers. The names cut through him like glass. He remembers once saying that if he ever had a son, he'd name him Julian after his grandfather. A cold wind sweeps through the park, carrying away the distant laughter of children. Wallace steps back, his hands falling to his sides. I didn't know. If I had known, but you didn't," Serena interrupts, her voice trembling. "Because you were the one who said you never wanted children." Wallace stands there, struck down by his words from 5 years ago. Serena takes her son's hands and walks away without looking back. He remains in the park, motionless, as the first raindrops begin to fall. 5 empty years flood back into him all at once, heavy, suffocating. He finally understands this is the price of the words his heart had been too blind to stop. That afternoon in Willowbrook carried the scent of autumn mixed with salt from the sea. Sunlight filtered through the oak branches, scattering pale gold across the damp ground after the morning rain. Serena held her son's hands and walked quickly down the road toward the little white house at the end of Maple Street. Outside, the lavender glistened with dew, bending softly in the breeze. But inside her, the wind no longer felt gentle. It carried echoes from the past, a deep voice she had thought she'd forgotten forever. "Serena." That voice lingered in the park, tangled in children's laughter and rustling leaves. She wanted to believe she'd imagined that the man she had just seen, the one with the face she once loved so fiercely, was no more than a trick of memory. But those eyes, that trembling smile, could belong to no one but Wallace Galbraith. Serena closed the door and leaned against the wall when she reached home. The boys chattered about their paper airplane, voices bright and alive, but her heart pounded wildly. 5 years. She had lived, tried to forget, built a life without him, and now, with one look, everything inside her shattered, as if it had never healed. That night, after the boys were asleep, Serena sat on the porch, listening to the distant hum of the sea. Maple Street was quiet, save for the faint buzz of a street lamp. She held a cup of tea and stared into the misted road. She could feel him somewhere close enough to sense his presence. And indeed, at the end of the street, Wallace stood still. He had found the small house after leaving the park. The white fence was twined with vines and pots of purple flowers. He saw 3 shadows through the window, 1 tall, 2 small, moving softly inside. He stayed there for a long time, unable to knock or believe what he saw. Serena looked just as he remembered, though not the fragile girl from those Napa evenings. She seemed steadier now, stronger, carrying a quiet light he couldn't define. And the 2 boys, they were living, breathing reminders of the greatest mistake of his life. He stood watching the house she had built, a world without him, peaceful and whole. At that moment, Wallace understood the money, the company, the acclaim. None mattered except what he had lost. He sat on a neighbor's stone bench until the lights inside her home dimmed one by one. When darkness finally fell, he whispered into the night, barely audible, "I'm sorry." The next morning, Serena arrived early at the school. She taught art to the elementary students, and today's lesson was painting autumn landscapes. The smell of watercolor and paper and the children's laughter helped her breathe again. While she showed a small group how to mix colors, Phoenix Whitmore's voice came from the door. "Serena, someone's asking for you. Looks familiar." Serena looked up. She didn't even have time to ask who before that familiar figure appeared. Long gray coat, dark hair tousled by the wind, eyes steady yet trembling. Wallace. The classroom went silent. The children turned to stare, curious about the stranger. Serena set down her brush, her composure fragile but intact. "Keep painting, everyone. I'll be right outside." She stepped into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her. Phoenix watched with narrowed eyes. "You want me to stay?" "It's fine," Serena said quietly. "Just an old story." Phoenix hesitated, then murmured, "If he hurts you again, I won't let it go." Serena smiled faintly, though unease rippled through her chest. When they were alone, the wind swept through the corridor, carrying the scent of dry leaves and the faint bell ring from another classroom. "I didn't think you'd speak to me," Wallace said, his voice rough. "I didn't think you'd come all the way here," she replied, calm on the surface. But her eyes stormed. "I've been looking for you for 5 years." "For what?" she asked, holding his gaze. "To tell me I misunderstood you, or to say you've changed?" He looked down at his hands. "I have no excuses. I just wanted to see you. And the children." Serena gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "The children? How long have you known they exist? 5 minutes. I saw them yesterday." "Yes. And now you want to walk into their lives as if you never said you never wanted children. Isn't that right?" Every word cut like glass. Wallace inhaled, but didn't defend himself. He deserved the blow. "Serena," he said softly, "I know I was wrong. Not for not wanting children, but for being afraid. Afraid of losing control, of life changing. I didn't understand that sometimes losing control is the only way to live truly." She shook her head. "Those are beautiful words, Wallace, but they're years too late." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, taking a cautious step forward. "I just need you to know there hasn't been a single day in these 5 years when I didn't think of you. Not a single night I didn't dream of your voice." Serena turned to the window where children laughed under the autumn. "Sunday, you don't understand. Some wounds can't be mended with regret." "I do," Wallace whispered, "because I've lived with mine every day." The school bell rang, breaking the tension. Serena's voice softened. "You shouldn't have come here. People know me, they know the boys. They don't need to know about the past." Wallace nodded, but his eyes lingered on her. "I'm sorry for hurting you. I don't know how to make it right, but if I can, I want to start anywhere you'll let me." She stayed silent. Part of her wanted to believe him. Another part wanted to run. Love had once cost her everything she was afraid to risk again. "I can't promise anything, Wallace. Not to you, not even to myself." "Then let me prove it," he said, almost whispering. "Not with words, with time." Serena looked at him. She didn't see the cold man from the past for the first time in years. The man before her was older, wearier, and filled with remorse. "Go," she said softly at last. "Don't make this harder." Wallace nodded, eyes heavy as the sea. He turned and walked toward the school gate. When the door shut behind him, Serena realized her hands were trembling. That afternoon, she taught like a machine. But his words, his face, they played over and over in her mind, like a song she couldn't turn off. That night, after the boys were asleep, she opened her old sketchbook, the one filled with drawings of him. The portrait was still there, Wallace with a glass of wine, eyes lost in thought. Beneath it, her handwriting read, "If one day you learn to love someone more than yourself, I'll believe again." A tear fell, smudging the ink. Serena sighed and closed the book. She didn't know if that day had come. Elsewhere in town, Wallace sat in his car by the harbor, staring at the reflection of streetlights on the water. He opened his phone. The Notes app held a single line. Day 1. Find a way to show them I've changed. He didn't know if Serena would ever forgive him, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't give up this time. 3 days after the meeting at school, Willowbrook lay under a thin veil of fog. The rain had stopped, but the earth was still damp, and the smell of cut grass filled the air. Serena spent her day off gardening, hands covered in soil, trying to dig her thoughts away from Wallace, but the harder she tried, the clearer his image became. She didn't know he was still in town, staying in a small rented room on the hill near the harbor, only a few streets away. Every morning, Wallace woke to church bells and the smell of baked bread from Phoenix's cafe. He never spoke to her. He knew she was Serena's friend. He just bought coffee and sat quietly on the same park bench where he had first seen his sons. He promised himself that if he saw them again, he would keep his distance and not complicate things further. But the heart doesn't listen to reason. That noon, Serena took the boys to play in the backyard. Julian drew with chalk on the cement, while Louis planted a small flag on a mound of dirt they called Fort Maple. All done, Louis shouted, holding up the flag that said, in wobbly letters, Home. Serena laughed. Your fort is wonderful. Mama, can we invite someone to our fort? Julian asked, eyes shining. Of course, as long as they're kind. Then I'll invite the tall man from the park, Louis said brightly. Serena froze. Who? The man with eyes like ours, Julian added. He smiled at us and left. I think he likes to draw too. Her lips tightened, heartbeat quickening. Before she could respond, a soft knock came from the fence. She turned. Wallace stood there in a pale blue shirt, holding a paper bag. His eyes searched hers carefully, hesitantly, as if afraid a wrong move would break the fragile peace. I'm sorry for coming unannounced, he said quietly. I just brought some cookies from Phoenix's. She said the boys love chocolate chip. Serena said nothing. The boys ran to the fence, eyes gleaming. Mister, you brought cookies? Louis asked. Wallace smiled, a gentle, unfamiliar smile. He knelt to their level and offered the bag. I did, but only if your mom says it's okay. Both turned to look at her. She hesitated, then sighed, nodding. All right, just for a little while. Wallace stepped through the gates slowly, as if entering a world he wasn't sure he belonged to. He sat on the porch, watching the boys share cookies. Taste good? He asked. Louis nodded eagerly, while Julian kept drawing. The boy tilted his head, studying Wallace, then said, Don't move. I'm drawing you. Wallace laughed softly, his heart melting. I'm honored. Serena watched from the steps. In 5 years, she had never seen his eyes so gentle. He didn't talk about business or success, just sat there, trembling with emotion as he looked at 2 small reflections of himself. Julian finished and handed him the drawing. Here you smiling, and these are 2 little dragons. Thank you, Wallace said, voice breaking. I'll keep it forever. Louis leaned forward. What's your name? I'm Louis. He's Julian. And that's Mama. Wallace swallowed hard and looked at Serena for permission. She stayed silent, then gave a faint nod. He turned back to them. My name's Wallace, but if you want, you can call me Daddy. The boys froze. Serena did too. Julian looked up at her, eyes wide. Mama, is that true? She knelt and pulled them close. Her voice trembled. Yes, he's your father. For a few seconds, the world stood still. Then Louis broke free and ran into Wallace's arms, clutching him tightly. I knew it. You look just like me. Wallace stiffened, then held him close, tears slipping down his cheeks. Julian came over quietly, hesitant, but when Wallace's hand touched his hair, he smiled that same smile from years ago. Serena turned away, hiding her tears. The Willowbrook sky was clear and blue. Sunlight filtered through the oak leaves, falling on the 3 of them, a peaceful scene that seemed to halt time. Later, they sat together in the garden. Serena poured tea while Wallace told stories about cities where it always rains and why rainbows have 7 colors. The boys listened, spellbound. Serena stayed silent, her emotions tangled. Every word he spoke carried a trace of remorse and tenderness. things he had never known how to show. When the children ran off chasing butterflies, Wallace turned to her. "Thank you for letting me meet them. Do you think saying sorry is enough?" she asked quietly, without looking at him. "No," he said without hesitation, "but I need to start somewhere, by letting them know I exist, and then proving I won't disappear again. Are you sure you can?" He met her gaze. "This time, I am." Silence fell, broken only by the laughter of children in the wind. Serena looked at them and softened. "They've been without a father for 5 years. Don't let them lose one again." Wallace nodded. "I promise." The words were quiet, but they lingered in the air. When he stood to leave, the boys clung to his coat. "Will you come back tomorrow, Daddy?" He smiled and kissed each of their foreheads. "If Mama says yes, Daddy will come every day." Serena met his eyes not with anger, but with a fragile, hesitant hope. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "they have an outdoor art class. If you're free, come." Wallace smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. "I'll be there." He walked through the gate, turning once to look back. Inside, Serena cleared the table. The boys laughed. The sky deepened into violet. The scene was so simple, so real. It ached, because he knew this was where he belonged. Driving home, he rolled down the window, letting the cold wind wash his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive, not because he was forgiven, but because he'd been given a chance to love again. That night, Serena sat by the window while her son slept, peaceful and dreaming. She gazed out at the moonlight breaking through clouds, wondering if somewhere in the dark, he was waiting for a day when he could truly be part of their lives. She smiled faintly. Maybe every wound needs to be looked at before healing. Outside, the wind swept through the lavender. Moonlight fell across the wall, casting the shadows of 3 figures together, a family, not yet whole, but finding its way back to each other. And somewhere in that wind, a voice seemed to whisper, "I'm sorry, and thank you for giving me another chance." Saturday morning dawned bright over Willowbrook after days of rain. Sunlight spilled across white rooftops, and smoke from kitchen chimneys curled into the cool air. Serena opened the window, letting the crisp morning breeze slip into her small kitchen. She set the coffee pot on the stove, listening to the soft bubbling sound of water. Inside, her sons were asleep, hair tousled, cheeks warm and pink from dreams. When a knock came at the door, she thought she had imagined it. But then it came again, gentle, patient. She stepped onto the porch and opened the door. Wallace stood there, holding a box of steaming pancakes, dressed simply in a white shirt, his expression uncertain. "I know you don't drink coffee on an empty stomach," he said quietly. "So, I brought breakfast." Serena looked at the box, then at him. For a moment, she hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in." "But you set the table yourself." He smiled faintly and stepped inside. The small house smelled of vanilla and early morning air. The boys' drawings were on the wall: red-roofed houses, suns, and 3 stick figures. A small space beside them made his chest tighten, as if he could see where he had once been erased. The twins tumbled sleepily down the stairs, breaking into squeals when they saw the box. "Daddy," Louis shouted first, making Wallace flinch. That word, so sacred yet straightforward, caught in his throat. He wasn't used to it, but didn't want to correct it. He just knelt and hugged his son, the scent of his hair and the warmth of his small body making his heart tremble. The morning unfolded in sweet chaos: flour on the table, syrup dripping onto Louis's hair, and Julian determinedly sketching the first breakfast with Daddy. Serena watched them, half laughing, half fighting to stay calm. Wallace fumbled with a frying pan. "Do I put milk in the eggs?" he asked. "No, just salt," Serena said, then paused, realizing how different his tone sounded, not commanding, but learning. The boys ate heartily when they finally sat down, while Wallace barely touched his food. He just looked around, memorizing everything: the light through the window, their laughter, Serena's hair tied with a simple cloth. "You're not eating?" she asked. "I'm eating with my eyes," he said softly. His gaze was tender. She turned away, hiding a smile. After breakfast, they all went to the garden. Julian carried his paint set, while Louis dragged a bucket of water for his own fish pond. Wallace crouched beside them, helping to hammer a wooden frame. Each time he missed the nail, Louis giggled uncontrollably. "Daddy, you're so clumsy." Wallace laughed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah, Daddy's still learning." The words were simple, but they stopped Serena in her tracks. He wasn't avoiding that word anymore. He wasn't afraid. He was learning piece by piece, moment by moment. Wallace took the boys to the small town market that afternoon. The three picked ice cream, cookies, and a superhero comic. Serena watched from a distance, her heart still and full. The golden light through the shop window wrapped them in quiet peace. From the bakery counter, Phoenix crossed her arms, smirking. "Looks like a family to me." "Don't start, Phoenix," Serena said with a small laugh. "I'm just saying," Phoenix replied. "He looks at those kids like he's finally learned to breathe again." Serena didn't answer. She just watched Wallace kneel to tie Louis's shoelaces, patient, gentle, like he'd been doing it his whole life. After the boys were tucked in that night, Wallace stood by the door, hesitating. "Thank you for today," he said. "Thank you for coming," Serena replied softly. "Can I see them tomorrow?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "They have an outdoor art class in the park." "I'll bring sandwiches," he said, smiling a smile warm as sunlight after rain. When he left, Serena sat down, her thoughts tangled. She knew she wasn't ready to forgive, but something inside her was shifting quiet as breath, but enough to warm her heart again. In the following days, Wallace became a familiar figure on Maple Street. Townsfolk began to notice the tall man often seen with two laughing boys at the park, carrying picnic baskets and smiling shyly. He was no longer CEO Galbraith. He was simply Daddy to Julian and Louis. Every afternoon, he waited under the oak tree to pick them up from school. At first, Serena felt uneasy, but slowly she got used to the sight. Wallace holding juice boxes, smiling awkwardly in the shade. He learned to braid Louis's hair, a serious request the boy insisted during pretend play. He learned to fold laundry, mix milk, and tell bedtime stories. Once, he misread a character's name, and both boys laughed. But their laughter filled spaces in his heart he hadn't known were empty. Julian woke from a nightmare one night, calling for Mama. Serena got up, but Wallace was already there when she reached the doorway, sitting beside the bed, softly humming a lullaby. His voice was low and rough, but warm. She stood silently, watching his shadow on the wall, and his shoulders trembled when the boy's small hand found his. She realized he didn't need to be a perfect father at that moment. He just needed to be present, with all his heart. The next morning, as Wallace was about to leave for work, Louis asked, "Daddy, why don't you stay here, always?" He chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Because Daddy has to earn money to buy ice cream," Louis frowned. "But we can share ours." Serena watched, her chest tightening. The fragments of the past were mending not with grand gestures, but with laughter, hugs, and little words that felt like healing. One afternoon, rain caught them by surprise. The four of them, Serena, Wallace, and the twins, took shelter under the awning of Phoenix's nest. Phoenix set 4 cups of hot cocoa on their table and grinned. "If this isn't a family, I don't know what is." Serena rolled her eyes, her cup steaming in her hands. "Families don't just come back that easily, Phoenix." Wallace said nothing. He looked at the rain and murmured, "Sometimes, though, you can build again if there's still love." Serena didn't answer, but her eyes softened. A few days later, Wallace received a call from his company. A major deal needed him back in Seattle. He looked out the window at his sons playing in the yard and hesitated for the first time in his career. That night, he came to see Serena. "I have to go to Seattle for a few days. I'll come back soon." "I understand," she said gently. "Just keep your word." "I will," he replied, and for the first time, he truly believed it. 4 days later, he returned. Not only with a signed contract, but also with a bigger decision to open a small branch of his company near Willowbrook. That evening, he came to her house with a small box. Inside were 3 toys he had bought 5 years ago but never got to give. The boys squealed with delight. Serena looked at the toys, her chest tightening. No bitterness now, just quiet sorrow for the years that had slipped away. When the children slept, she joined him on the porch. Wallace gazed at the stars. "You've changed," she said softly. I don't know if I'm better, he answered, eyes still on the sky. But I know this time, I want to stay. She said nothing. No promises were needed, just presence and time. In the still night, children's laughter echoed faintly from their dreams. Moonlight fell across the white fence, and in that calm, Serena finally understood happiness doesn't always come from starting over, but from choosing never to walk away again. June arrived in Willowbrook, bright and alive. The sky seemed so blue that you could touch it with your fingertips. Behind Serena's house, the fields were overgrown with wild grass, the wind carrying the scent of lavender and pine. Julian and Louis had just turned 6, the age of boundless imagination and endless adventures. One morning, Wallace asked, "How about we build something really special?" 2 pairs of eyes lit up at once. "A fort," Louis shouted. "In the woods," Julian added. From the kitchen, Serena laughed. "A fort? What will you two build it with, crayons and paper?" "No," Wallace said, turning with a spark in his eyes. "With real wood. I know how." Serena looked up, surprise and worry mingling in her expression. "You're not taking them to build a house in the woods, are you?" "Not a house," he replied gently. "Just a place they can call their own. A safe place." Those last 2 words stilled her. A safe place. They landed deep in her chest. 3 days later, the project began. Wallace borrowed tools from the town's workshop and loaded wooden planks into his old pickup truck. The boys, wearing plastic helmets far too big for them, ran around their father like 2 excited squirrels. From the window, Serena watched with a soft smile. The sight, the 3 of them hammering wood, laughing under the trees, looked like a dream she'd once dared to dream, then buried. "Hold it steady, Julian," Wallace said, his large hand covering the boy's smaller one. "That's it. Perfect." Meanwhile, Louis declared himself in charge of interior design. He drew with crayons a tiny hut with a round window and a sign that read Castle Bun Galbraith. "Bun is Mama's name, and Galbraith is Daddy's," Louis explained proudly. "Because it's for all of us." Wallace laughed, though his eyes shimmered with something more profound than joy. Serena came outside, handing them a bottle of water. "Are you sure you still remember how to use a saw?" she teased. "Not much choice," he smiled. "But if you're worried, stay and supervise." She started to walk away, then stopped. "I'll stay to ensure you don't ruin my garden." They all laughed together. At noon, they sat under the pines with sandwiches. Julian drew a treasure map for the fort, while Louis named every stone around it. Wallace lay back, staring at the blue sky, listening to the boys' laughter fill the air. Peace spread through him like sunlight. He thought briefly of Seattle, the glass towers, the endless meetings, and felt nothing but distance. Here, in this little patch of woods, he finally felt alive. "You've changed," Serena said quietly beside him, eyes on their sons. "Hopefully for the better," Wallace replied with a slight grin. "You used to hate getting your hands dirty. Now look at you." She pointed at his shirt, streaked with sawdust and dirt. "Maybe I finally found something worth getting dirty for." She didn't answer, but her heart trembled. He wasn't the man who once gave orders and feared imperfection. He knew how to kneel now, to listen, to laugh. By late afternoon, sunlight slanted through the trees, and the fort stood complete, humble but sturdy. A small hut with a wooden door, a slanted roof, and a hand-painted sign in blue that read Castle Bun Galbraith. "It's done," Julian shouted. "Castle Bun Galbraith is finished." Serena stepped inside. Light filtered through the gaps in the wood, dust floating like stars. She sat down, the boys crawling into her lap, Wallace ducking through the small doorway. "It's strange," Serena murmured. "This is the first house you've ever built for us, and the first home I've ever truly wanted to call mine," Wallace said. Outside, the wind stirred through the trees. Laughter rose and echoed all the way to the forest's edge. Serena stepped out into the yard when the boys were asleep that night. Moonlight poured over the little wooden fort, casting 4 shadows across the grass. Wallace joined her, silent for a while before saying, "I used to think success meant standing high enough to look down at the world. Now I know happiness is when you look down and see 3 people waiting for you in the backyard." Serena turned toward him. His eyes were so honest that it made her look away in the moonlight. You're scaring me, Wallace. Why? Because for the first time, I actually believe you. He smiled softly, touching her hand. Then don't be afraid. That Saturday afternoon, clouds rolled in from the bay. Wind whipped through the trees, and leaves rustled like warnings of a coming storm. Serena glanced up from the window, unease tightening her chest. Outside, the boys played near the new fort. Wallace was helping them tie down the canvas door, laughing. Warriors, prepare for battle. The enemy is the storm. Louis squealed. We won't lose, Daddy. Serena stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. If you don't get them inside soon, your fort will fly away. Yes, ma'am. Wallace saluted playfully. Then thunder cracked in the distance. A gust slammed the door against the wall. Heavy raindrops began to fall like marbles. Inside now, Serena called. Wallace grabbed Louis, pulling Julian by the hand as they dashed into the house. The door shut, just as the sky opened up. Rain pounded the roof like 1,000 drums. The lights flickered. Condensation fogged the windows. The boys huddled in blankets, eyes wide. Our fort, Louis whispered. Through the blurred glass, Wallace saw the planks shaking in the wind. He turned to Serena. I have to check it, it'll collapse. Are you insane? She grabbed his hand. The wind's too strong. You can't. I have to protect what they love, he said quietly. Not the wood, their belief in it. Something in his eyes made her freeze. She saw the light of someone she'd never met before, a father. She nodded once. Okay, but I'm coming with you. Before he could protest, she threw on a raincoat and ran out beside him. The storm roared. Wind whipped through the pines, rain slashing their faces. The fort trembled violently. Wallace held the main beam while Serena secured the flap. They were soaked, laughing breathlessly, the laughter of two people who hadn't stood side by side in years. Remember when you said you hated the rain? She shouted through the storm. And now, he yelled back, I think it's perfect. The post wobbled. He tied it down with rope, hands shaking. Serena held the end steady, her hair plastered to her face. Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces, tired, drenched, but bound by one shared purpose. To save something small that meant everything. When the wind finally eased, they sank onto the muddy ground, gasping. The fort stood crooked, battered, but alive. Wallace tilted his head back and laughed, steam rising from his breath in the cold air. We did it. Serena looked at him, laughing through tears. You're insane. Maybe. But it's the first time being crazy has made me happy. She didn't reply. She just sat beside him, listening to the rain soften to a whisper. When they returned home, the boys were waiting by the window, eyes red from crying. They ran forward when they saw their parents, hugging them tight. Is our fort okay? Julian asked. Wallace smiled. Still standing, strong as my two brave knights. Louis squealed and wrapped his arms around his neck. I knew Daddy would save it. Serena watched them, her heart swelling. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the moon peeked through the clouds. That night, they all sat together in the living room, a blanket spread across the rug, the fireplace crackling. Wallace retold the great battle of Fort Maple, making the boys giggle between sips of cocoa. Serena poured tea, quiet, watching them, feeling as if she had finally touched something she thought she'd lost forever. A family. When the boys fell asleep against their father's shoulders, Wallace looked at her. I never thought saving a wooden fort could make me feel so alive. It wasn't the fort, she said softly. It was what you were saving with someone else. Their eyes met, the firelight dancing in both. No more words, only an understanding that what had been broken was quietly finding its way back. The night drifted slowly. The wind had gone still. Serena pulled a blanket over the boys, then turned to find Wallace still by the window. You're not leaving? I want to stay to guard their fort, he said, voice low. And to ensure I'm still here when they wake up tomorrow. Serena didn't move. In that moment, she understood some promises don't need to be spoken, only kept. Outside, moonlight bathed the little fort in silver, its wooden walls still damp but standing firm. From the porch, the fire's glow spilled warmly onto the yard like the steady heartbeat of four people learning to trust again, to stay. And in the quiet breath of Willowbrook's night, Serena thought without speaking. Thank you for not leaving this time. July arrived, spilling golden light across Willowbrook's rooftops and the small river winding through town. The air was warm, and children's laughter filled every street. Serena and her sons had grown used to seeing Wallace each morning, sometimes bringing pastries and a smile before walking the boys to school. Afternoons passed in gentle rhythm, the three of them painting, watering flowers, or repairing the maple fort, now a gathering place for father and sons. Life seemed peaceful until the black car from Seattle stopped in front of Serena's house. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, holding an envelope. "Mr. Galbraith," he said formally, "the board is waiting. The new investment deal requires your signature within 48 hours. Wallace stood still, his hand tightening slightly. "Mr. Galbraith." The title once felt powerful. Now it sounded foreign, heavy. Serena appeared at the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Is something wrong?" He turned to her, voice softening. "Just the old life calling." The twins ran out and clung to his legs. "Daddy, are you going back to Seattle?" Louis asked. Wallace crouched, brushing the boy's hair. "I might have to go for a few days." Serena said nothing, but an old fear stirred in her, the fear that he might not come back this time. After the boys were asleep that evening, they sat together on the porch, a light breeze rustling through the trees. "Do you know," Wallace began quietly, "I used to think I was born to lead, to conquer." "I figured as much," Serena replied, calm but watchful. "But I realized," he said, "the hardest thing isn't running a company. It's learning how to keep the people you love." Serena said nothing. Moonlight silvered her hair. "And what will you do with that realization?" He looked at her for a long time. "I don't know yet, but I know this. I don't want to lose anything again." 2 days later, Wallace returned to Seattle. The city greeted him with familiar noise and cold gleam-glass towers stretching high into a pale sky. As he walked into his office, it felt like stepping backward in time. Everything looked the same, yet he knew he was not. Board members shook their hands enthusiastically. "We're looking at the biggest opportunity in company history." He listened to numbers, projections, the endless talk of profit. But in his mind, he saw only Serena and the boys, laughing by the lavender fence in Willowbrook. After the meeting, his assistant handed him a thick folder. "One signature, sir, and the company enters a new era." Wallace flipped to the last page. His name was already printed, he only needed to finish the final stroke. Outside the window, Seattle glowed beautiful, distant, lonely. He saw his reflection there, a man who'd climbed to the top, but hollow inside. He set the pen down. "Sell it." The assistant froze. "Sir, what did you say?" "Sell my shares. Transfer all executive authority," Wallace said calmly. "I've been at the helm long enough." "But you're giving up everything you built." "No," he interrupted softly. "I'm keeping what truly matters." He removed the silver watch from his wrist, the symbol of his power, and placed it on the desk. "Tell them goodbye. From now on, I'm not Mr. Galbraith." As the elevator doors closed behind him, Wallace felt as if he were shedding an entire lifetime. In his pocket was a single photograph, Serena and the boys beside the maple fort, sunlight wrapping around them. He drove through the night, past highways, hills, and coastlines. With every mile, he felt lighter. When dawn broke, Willowbrook emerged through the morning mist. Light fell over the little street as though welcoming him home. He parked in front of Serena's house. She was outside watering the flowers, her hair a little messy, her dress simple. Seeing him, she froze, her heartbeat quickening. "You're back?" "I'm home," Wallace said, his voice rough but steady. "Not for a few days, for good." Her eyes widened, somewhere between belief and fear. "You left the company?" "I didn't leave," he said. "I sold it." Her brow furrowed. "Why would you do that?" "To live honestly," he replied, eyes on hers. "I don't need an empire. I just need the 3 people in this house." Serena stood still. His words were soft, yet they rang through her like a bell. 5 years of waiting, of hurt and healing, all converged into that moment. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You're out of your mind." "Maybe," he said with a smile, "but at least this time, I'm crazy for the right reason." In the following days, Willowbrook gossiped. Wallace Galbraith, the millionaire from Seattle, has moved here for good. Wallace didn't care. He rented a small workshop at the forest's edge, where he and the boys built furniture and fixed old tables. Serena kept teaching. Each evening when she returned home, she saw the same sight that made her heart quietly swell. Wallace sitting on the porch steps, the twins beside him, laughter filling the air. No suits, no polished shoes, just jeans, a t-shirt, and hands roughened by wood and paint. One afternoon, Phoenix stopped by and whistled low. "Well, if this isn't a miracle, I don't know what is." Serena rolled her eyes. "He's just changing." "No, Serena," Phoenix said softly. "He's finally living." When the children were asleep that night, Serena brewed tea and brought it to the porch. Wallace sat in the chair he'd made, gazing at the stars. The light from the house traced gentle lines across his once proud face, now calm, grounded. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "For what?" "For giving up everything you had." Wallace looked up at the sky, where thousands of stars shimmered. "Serena, I've stood in the most expensive rooms in the world, and never once felt happy. Now, hearing our boys laugh and seeing you at the stove, I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She studied him, emotion flickering in her eyes. "Aren't you afraid that one day I won't believe you again?" "I'm not afraid of losing you," he said gently. "I'm only afraid of not having the chance to prove myself." Silence settled between them, filled only by the hum of night insects and their steady breathing. "Serena," Wallace said quietly, "I love you, not because you're the mother of my children, but because you made me want to become a better man." She lowered her head, hands tightening around her teacup. "Do you know what scares me most, Wallace? Not that you'll leave again, but I'll believe you." "Then let me be afraid with you," he said, echoing the words she had once spoken long ago. She looked up. Their eyes met in the soft, golden light, honest, gentle, wordless. A light breeze stirred the curtain. Wallace reached across the table and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. "I sold the company," he murmured, "but what I really bought is this moment." Serena smiled through quiet tears. "You still know how to make people cry." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Then I hope this time they're tears of happiness." She said nothing, only leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, the sound of crickets mingled with the distant sea. Something in her heart melted light as breath, deep as roots. "Welcome home, Wallace," she whispered. He smiled, his voice low. "I'm home, Serena." Moonlight spread across the porch, wrapping them in its tender glow. And for the first time in 5 years, the 4 souls inside that little house no longer feared tomorrow. That night, Willowbrook shimmered as if dusted with silver. The moon hung full and round above the quiet little town, its light glinting off rooftops and leaves, as though even the houses were breathing happiness. A soft breeze carried the scent of lavender from Serena's garden to the porch, where 2 small children were already asleep. Serena stepped softly out of their room, closing the door behind her. She wore a thin cardigan, holding a cup of ginger tea, and settled into the wooden swing chair. The night hummed with wind and crickets, a simple, tender symphony. Wallace sat beside her, a worn copy of The Little Prince in his hand, borrowed from the town library. Moonlight washed across the pages and over his face in a soft silver glow. "You're still reading that?" Serena asked with a faint smile. "Yeah," he said, closing the book. "I never understood how someone could love a flower enough to endure loneliness to protect it. Now I do." She looked at him, something both soft and aching stirring inside her. "You always know how to make everything sound romantic, Wallace." "No," he said with a quiet laugh. "I'm just telling the truth. For 5 years, I kept replaying that last night in my head. I wondered what your face looked like when I said, 'I never want children.' But then I realized what scared me most wasn't losing you. It was that I made you stop believing in love." Serena didn't speak. The breeze lifted a strand of hair across her cheek. "I used to wonder if you remembered every detail," he said softly. "The way you placed your hand on the table and tried to stay calm. I've relived that night 1,000 times, Serena. Every time, I wished I could return, take your hand, and say the opposite." She set her cup down, her voice trembling slightly. "But we can't go back, Wallace. We can only move forward. I know. He turned toward her, his gaze steady. And I want to move forward with you. Silence filled the air, so quiet they could hear the leaves brushing together. Serena lifted her head, the moon reflected in her eyes like water. You don't understand, she whispered. For 5 years, I learned to live without anyone. I built fences around my heart, thinking if I never opened it again, I'd never hurt again. But those fences kept you in, too, Wallace said. She looked at him, half afraid, half curious. And you think you can tear them down? He shook his head. No, I'll sit outside them and wait until you're ready. Serena laughed, a slight, shaky sound. You're patient, I'll give you that. It's not patience, he said softly. It's because I don't have another choice. When you love someone, really love them, you wait. The moonlight fell over them, silvering her hair, tracing his jaw. Serena turned toward the distant trees. I'm scared, Wallace. Scared to trust again. Scared to lose again. Then let me be scared with you, he murmured, repeating the exact words she'd once spoken to him, long ago, in the rain. Serena turned back. Their eyes met two small flames finding each other in the dark. Wallace reached out his hand. She hesitated, then placed hers in his. His palm was warm, steady, trembling just a little. He squeezed gently and lowered his lips to the back of her hand. The kiss was soft, almost hesitant, as though he was afraid to break the moment. Serena closed her eyes. Every memory came rushing back, the wine-lit evenings, the laughter, the night she'd left. But now, none of it hurts. It only made her heart tremble, alive again. When she opened her eyes, Wallace watched her as if asking permission. She didn't speak, she only nodded. He leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was gentle, slow, and uncertain, like two people relearning what love felt like. The air was full of ginger tea, lavender, and old wood. The world seemed to stop. There was only breath and heartbeat, and the moon shone like a quiet blessing. When they parted, they didn't speak. Serena smiled through the tears glimmering in her eyes. I don't know whether to scold you or thank you. I'll take both, Wallace said, voice rough. She took a slow breath. For 5 years, I taught our children to believe in love, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how. Thank you for reminding me. I don't want thanks, he said softly. I just want you to know I'm here, no matter what happens. Inside the house, a sleepy voice mumbled, Mama. Louis, half dreaming. Serena turned her head toward the sound. I should go in. I know, Wallace said, smiling faintly. Good night, Serena. She stood, took a few steps, then stopped. Wallace, he looked up. Don't go anywhere tonight. He paused, then nodded. That night, Wallace didn't leave. He lay on the couch in the living room, a thin blanket over him. Moonlight streamed through the window, spilling across the floor and over his face, peaceful, serene. For the first time in years, he slept deeply. No dreams, no unrest. Just the quiet of a man who had finally found home. At dawn, Serena woke early. She entered the living room and found him still asleep, one arm over his forehead, breathing steadily. A stray lock of hair fell across his brow. He looked impossibly calm. She stood for a while, watching him, then smiled, soft, sure. Something inside her had shifted. No more walls, no more fear, just the peace of knowing someone was there not to claim her, but to share the same air, the same silence. The twins soon tumbled out of bed. Seeing Wallace, Louis shouted, Daddy's still here. Julian grinned. I told you, Daddy's not leaving again. Serena turned to him with a smile. Looks like you just passed the most important test. Wallace laughed, running his hands through the boy's hair. Daddy's not going anywhere. Breakfast was chaos and laughter, pancakes slightly burnt, syrup spilled across the table, and the boys singing, You Are My Sunshine, while Wallace pretended to strum a wooden spoon like a guitar. Serena watched them, her heart slowly melting. No rings, no grand promises, just sunlight, warmth, and the quiet certainty of enough. As he walked the boys to the school bus, Serena followed to the porch. Morning light gleamed off his hair, as if washing away everything that once was. Wallace, she called. He turned. I don't know what the future holds, but today, I'm happy. He smiled, stepped closer, and brushed her cheek with his hand. Then that's enough reason for me to stay for a lifetime. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the scent of lavender around them. Far off, the church bells began to ring bright, gentle, like laughter. In that morning light, they stood side by side without another word. Everything had been said that fear had faded, that love had returned, and that this family, at last, had found its dawn after a long night. September came, and Willowbrook began to change. The trees turned gold at the edges, and the mornings carried a misty chill. Life for the four of them moved gently, peacefully, so peaceful that sometimes Serena wondered whether peace could ever truly last. That evening, dark clouds gathered. Louis, her bright, laughing boy, was unusually quiet at dinner. When Serena reached across to touch his forehead, she froze. "Louis, you're burning up." He looked up weakly. "Mama, I feel dizzy." Wallace pressed his hand to the boy's forehead. The heat made him stand up instantly. "I'm taking him to the hospital." Serena nodded, already grabbing her coat. Julian clutched her hand. "Mama, I'll go too." "No, sweetheart. Stay with Auntie Phoenix. Daddy and I will bring him home soon." They rushed into the rain. Thunder rolled as Wallace drove through the storm, one hand gripping the wheel, the other holding Louis's tiny hand in the back seat. The boy's breathing grew shallow, his skin hot. "Louis, can you hear Mama?" Serena called, tears streaming. "Yeah, I hear." His voice faded into a whisper. Wallace's jaw tightened. He pushed the accelerator. Rain slashed across the windshield, the wipers racing furiously. The headlights lit his face tense, terrified, helpless. At Willowbrook General Hospital, nurses ran out to meet them. Within seconds, Louis was on a stretcher and wheeled toward the emergency ward. Serena tried to follow, but a nurse held her back. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You have to wait outside." The doors shut. Serena stood motionless, rain dripping from her hair. Wallace stepped up and wrapped his arms around her. "He'll be okay, Serena." Her voice broke. "You don't understand. I've already lost so much. I can't lose again." He held her tighter. "You won't. Not this time. I'm here. You're not alone anymore." For a long moment, the harsh lights of the hospital blurred. There was only the sound of their shaking breaths, fear and faith intertwined. Time slowed to a crawl, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the footsteps of nurses, and the ticking clock. Serena sat hunched over, head in her hands. Wallace stood beside her, eyes fixed on the closed door of the ICU. When the doctor finally came out, his tone was steady. "Your son has a viral infection with a high fever. We're stabilizing him, but tonight will be critical. He'll need someone with him." Serena exhaled sharply, tears spilling again. Wallace nodded. "We'll stay." They were led into a small room beside the ICU. Louis lay pale and still, an IV in his hand. Serena sat by the bed, clutching his fingers. "Mama's here, Louis." Wallace stood on the other side, his heart twisting painfully. He remembered his old words, "I never want children," and felt them shatter inside him. He sat down and laid his hand gently over his son's. "Daddy's here too." Louis's eyelids fluttered. "Daddy, don't go." "I'm not going anywhere," Wallace whispered. The night deepened. The clock struck 2. Serena's eyes were swollen and red from crying. Wallace brought her a paper cup of coffee from the vending machine. "Drink something." "I can't. You have to stay strong," he said gently. "Louis needs to see you're not afraid." She looked up at him, exhausted, yet trusting. "You used to be terrible, Wallace. I know. But tonight, you're a good father." He lowered his head, and a single tear fell onto his hand. Wallace had never cried in front of anyone until that moment, when the weight of being forgiven made his heart tremble. Around 3 in the morning, Louis stirred. Serena gasped. "Doctor!" A nurse hurried in, checked the monitor, and smiled faintly. "The fever's breaking. He's responding well." Serena let out a sob of relief, kissing her son's forehead. Wallace stood still, eyes closed, silently thanking whatever mercy had heard them. The storm outside was fading, but something new had begun to open within them, quiet and deep. When dawn seeped through the white curtains, Serena was still by the bedside. Louis slept peacefully, color returning to his cheeks. The monitor beeped softly, steady and calm. Wallace sat near the window, with dark circles under his eyes, but his expression was gentle. He hadn't looked away from them all night. "Get some rest," Serena murmured. He shook his head with a faint smile. "I'm afraid if I blink, I'll miss him waking up." She watched him, emotion rising in her chest. The man before her was no longer the Wallace of 5 years ago, cold, distant, self-absorbed. This man had learned how to love simply by being present. Near 8 o'clock, Louis's eyelids fluttered open. He blinked and whispered, "Daddy." Wallace was instantly at his side, taking his hand. "Daddy's right here. I knew you'd come," Louis murmured, smiling weakly. Serena broke down in tears, holding her son close. Then she looked up at Wallace, eyes shining. "Thank you." He shook his head, voice rough. "No, thank you for letting me be here." The nurse came in softly. "He's doing well now. You can go home, freshen up, and come back later." Serena nodded, but as she turned, Louis grabbed her hand. "Mama, Daddy can stay with me." Wallace bent down. "Daddy will stay. Mama needs to rest." Serena hesitated, searching his eyes. "You're sure?" "He promise." She smiled faintly. "Okay." After she left, Wallace sat by the bed and told Louis silly stories about the Maple Fort and how they'd fought off the storm together. The boy laughed softly before drifting back to sleep. When Serena returned at noon, she found Wallace still there, eyes half closed, hands still holding his son's. The sight stopped her at the doorway, her heart filling with warmth. By afternoon, Louis was moved to a regular room. Julian and Phoenix arrived with balloons and flowers, laughter echoing through the ward. For the first time in days, the room felt full of light. Serena looked around at the faces she loved, the soft glow of the sun, and knew this family had truly healed. No more fear, no more distance. That night, when they finally came home, Serena paused by the door and turned to Wallace. "I don't think I ever realized how much I needed someone until now." He smiled, eyes warm like sunlight after a storm. "And I've never been more certain I'm exactly where I should be." Outside, Willowbrook glowed under the sunset. The church bells rang across the valley, and in the little house at the end of Maple Street, a white night had passed, one that had awakened them from sleep and every shadow of the past. After the autumn storm, Willowbrook seemed more apparent than ever. The air carried the scent of pine and damp earth, sunlight slipping through the branches like ribbons of gold. Louis was fully recovered, racing around the yard with his laughter ringing through the breeze, while Julian sat under a tree, writing about his brave hospital night. Serena watched her children playing with Wallace and felt an ache of peace, the kind she once thought she'd never find again. It was an ordinary scene, a quiet afternoon, a small house, laughter drifting through the air, yet it felt miraculous. Phoenix arrived with a basket of pastries, grinning. "Every time I come here, you people look happier." Serena smiled, pouring tea. "Maybe we finally learned how to live quietly." Phoenix tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "And he's clearly up to something." "What do you mean? You haven't noticed? He keeps sneaking glances at you and hiding something in his jacket pocket." Serena laughed, shaking her head. "Phoenix, not everyone's as suspicious as you." But that evening, when she stepped into the garden, Wallace stood beneath the oak tree, the one strung with small golden lights that glowed softly across the yard. He turned as she approached, a small velvet box in his hand. "Serena," he said quietly. Her heart skipped. "I used to think I didn't deserve a second chance," Wallace began, voice low and sincere. "But every morning I wake up and see you, and the boys, I realize I've been given a miracle. I don't want to be a guest in your life anymore. I want to be your home." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver ring, catching the warm light like water. Serena froze. The world seemed to hold its breath, the crickets silent, the leaves still. Wallace knelt. "Serena Bunn, will you marry me?" Her heart trembled. Every memory, the tears, the loneliness, the years of rebuilding rushed back. All of it had led to this moment. "Wallace," she whispered, tears shining. "I don't know what to say." "Just say what's true," he murmured. "Say what your heart wants." She took a breath, meeting his eyes. "I love you, but I'm still afraid." He reached for her hand, his voice as soft as the wind. Afraid of what? Of losing this. Of waking up one day and watching it all slip away again. Of being happy only for a little while. Wallace was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Then I'll stay until you're not afraid anymore. I don't need a yes, don't close the door on me." Serena looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded, a faint smile trembling through her tears. "You really have changed." "I had to," he said with a small laugh, "because I didn't want to love you like I used to." She touched the ring in his hand, not to wear it, to hold it. "I'll keep it here. When I'm ready, I'll put it on." He nodded. "I'll wait." A breeze stirred, scattering golden leaves around them. The ring caught the light, throwing a shimmer across the ground, a fragile promise glowing between them. That night, after the boys were asleep, Serena sat by the window, the ring resting in her palm. She felt peace and a slight ache too. Happiness was so close, she could almost touch it, yet there was still that fine line between nearly and forever. In the days that followed, neither of them mentioned the ring again. Serena kept it in a small drawer between her children's drawings. She touched it gently each time she opened it, reminding herself, trust slowly, but trust. Wallace never pushed. He stayed cooking breakfast, fixing fences, walking the boys to school. Life went on so naturally that sometimes Serena forgot he'd ever asked her to marry him. One afternoon, they took the children to the maple fort. The late sun poured through the trees, painting everything in amber light. Louis planted a new flag, and Julian sketched quietly beside him. Serena sat on a log, watching them, her heart light as air. Wallace handed her a bottle of water. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "Just learning how to wait. I didn't know waiting could feel this peaceful." She tilted her head. "You used to hate waiting. I used not to know who was worth waiting for." Serena didn't answer. The wind lifted her hair, and the light softened, and peace didn't feel like something fragile. For the first time it felt real. He was still here, even without her. Yes. After Wallace tucked the boys in that evening, Serena sat outside, watching the stars. Phoenix called, her tone teasing. "So, did he propose yet?" "He did," Serena said with a quiet laugh. "And you said?" "Nothing." A pause. "You're still afraid?" "No," Serena said softly. "I just want to say yes when it's not because he's changed, but because I'm ready to believe again." Phoenix's voice grew gentle. "You've changed, Serena. You used to live to avoid pain. Now you live to love again." After the call, Serena sat in the hush of the night. The moonlight glinted off the ring. She slipped briefly onto her finger only momentarily, before she took it off again. But this time, she didn't cry. She smiled a quiet, steady smile. When Wallace came out and found her there, he didn't ask anything. He sat beside her. "You know," she said softly, "I'm not afraid anymore." He turned to her, moonlight catching in his eyes. "Really?" She nodded. "Because I've learned love isn't about promising never to hurt. It's about choosing to stay, even when it might." Wallace smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then, Serena, I'll stay even if it might hurt." They both chuckled, their laughter melting into the calm of the Willowbrook night. Moonlight spread across the porch where two silhouettes sat side by side, no vows, no rings yet, only something deeper. Trust, returning at last. Between almost and forever, sometimes all it takes is a long enough silence for the heart to heal. And in that silence, Serena knew. The next time Wallace asked, her answer would be yes. A year had passed since the night of the unspoken yes. Willowbrook bloomed into spring, no longer cold, only soft mists and the scent of new grass. The town seemed brighter, and the little house at the end of Maple Street glowed with life. Pale lavender climbed the fence, swaying gently under the morning Sunday. Serena sat by the window, watching her family in the yard. Louis was learning to throw a baseball, while Julian snapped photos with his father's old camera. Each burst of laughter made her heart tremble, not from emotion anymore, but from peace. Wallace was no longer the man from Seattle. He had become the man of Willowbrook, rolled-up sleeves, worn jeans, shoes dusted with sawdust, and eyes filled with quiet patience. He had opened a small workshop downtown, Galbraith's workshop, where he fixed tables, framed paintings, and sometimes made wooden toys for the local kids. Beneath the sign, a smaller line read in his handwriting, "Made with love, from Willowbrook." Phoenix still dropped by often, teasing as always. "The town's #1 couple, huh?" Serena would smile, but her smile softened whenever her eyes met Wallace's more real and tender. That evening at dinner, Julian suddenly blurted out, "Daddy, when is Mama going to be your bride?" Serena froze, nearly spilling her drink. Louis giggled. "I want to hold the ring for Mama." Wallace glanced at the boys, then at Serena, grinning. "That's a tough question, fellas." Serena blushed but said nothing. She stepped out to the porch after the boys were asleep that night. The moonlight was soft, almost silver. She opened a drawer and took out the small velvet box. The silver ring glimmered as if it had been waiting all along. This time, her hands didn't tremble. Footsteps sounded behind her. Wallace stood in the doorway, silent. "I know," he said quietly. "When you take it out, it means you're ready." Serena turned toward him, eyes shining. "Not just because I'm ready," she whispered, "but because I know you'll still be here whether I wear it or not." He stepped closer, his voice barely above a breath. "I've always been here." Serena lifted the ring, sliding it onto her finger. The metal was cool at first, then warm like it had found its place. "I think this is the answer you've been waiting for." Wallace looked at her for a long time. Moonlight shimmered in his eyes. He didn't kiss her, he just held her hand tight. "Thank you," he said softly, "for choosing me again." She shook her head. "No, this time, it's the first real choice I've ever made." The night wind carried the scent of lavender through the yard. The moon above was full just like that night a year ago, except now, they weren't afraid. A week later, Willowbrook was buzzing with joy. Serena Bunner and Wallace Galbraith are getting married in the Maple Woods. There were no fancy invitations, only a wooden sign Julian painted himself. "Mama and Daddy's forever day. Everyone welcome." The sun rose over the hills that morning, sprinkling golden light across the dew-soaked grass. The maple fort, the little fort they'd built years ago, was dressed in wildflowers, balloons, and the boys' drawings. Serena wore a simple white dress, her hair loosely tied back, her face radiant yet serene. Phoenix, self-proclaimed maid of honor, held a bunch of lavender and teased, "If he runs this time, I'm chasing him down myself." Wallace laughed as he straightened his tie. No running, just walking straight toward her. The ceremony occurred beneath the old oak tree, the same place he had knelt a year before. The morning light filtered through the leaves, painting soft gold across their faces. When Serena approached, Wallace took a deep breath. She wore no jewels, only the silver ring, a quiet symbol of everything they had walked through. Phoenix officiated, smiling. "Would either of you like to say something?" Serena nodded. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "I once thought love only existed when people didn't make mistakes. But you taught me that love sometimes begins when we admit we were wrong and choose to stay anyway. Thank you, Wallace, for not leaving, even when I wasn't ready." Wallace's hand tightened around hers. His voice was rough but steady. "I once had everything, Serena. But losing you was the only thing that ever made me understand emptiness. I won't promise I'll never fail again, only that, if I lose my way, I'll still find my way back to you." A soft breeze rustled through the trees. Someone sniffled. Then laughter erupted when Louis shouted, "Can Daddy kiss Mama now?" Phoenix laughed. "Do it before he asks again." Wallace leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't long, or dramatic, just full of love. The sunlight poured over them, turning the moment into something golden and still. Applause and cheers filled the clearing. The boys ran up and wrapped their arms around them. "The Galbraith family is official now," Julian shouted. As the day faded, they ate cake, drank wine, listened to Phoenix strum the guitar, and laughed until the forest turned amber with sunset. No fireworks, no luxury, just simple joy. When everyone left, Serena and Wallace stayed behind at the maple fort. The fairy lights twinkled above them. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I used to think I knew what forever meant," he murmured. "Now I know forever isn't about never changing. It's about changing, together, and still staying." Serena smiled softly, and loving in a new way, every single day. She looked up at the sky. The stars glittered, just like the night they had met again in Willowbrook Park. But this time, there was no fence between them. "Wallace?" she whispered. "Yes? I love you." He smiled, his voice deep and steady. "I love you too, from the first day, until the sky runs out of stars." The breeze whispered through the forest, and the maple fort creaked gently, as if agreeing. And there, beneath the sky of Willowbrook, surrounded by lavender and moonlight, 4 small souls had finally found what so many spend a lifetime searching for: a home, an embrace, and a love that knew how to stay.